Okay, should be recording now. All right. So welcome everyone who is watching the recording. We have opened Replit, gone over some rules for the class, and now we are practicing our print statements. Apologize for that interruption in recording. So we're practicing the print statement just like from last time. And now if I run this, it's going to run that first line. So notice in this run, it prints 4, and then it's going to print the result of this. So we've got that print statement there. Amazing, amazing. Now, what Nathan mentioned, which I love, was that if we put this in quotes, so if I say print quote 1 plus 3, it's not going to print 4 like it has been. It's actually just going to print 1 plus 3. That's something to think about for a little bit there, and we'll come back to why that is. We'll come back to why that is. Okay. Back to the slides. And yes, you can access the slides in our class slides Google Drive. All right, so we went over Python syntax as a review, and then our quick start as a review. Some other things you can try are these different operations. So much like if you're typing using a calculator, you can use the minus symbol. Oops. You can use the minus symbol. This star represents multiplication, division. Star, I added, or 2 asterisks, I added as kind of a bonus problem to your homework last time. And if you tried it out, then you would have seen that this is representing an exponent. So if you have, 3 asterisk 2, that represents 3 to the 2nd power, or 3 squared. So that's how we're going to be using exponents in Python. And we'll always have this as reference, so if you forget exactly what they mean, but you'll quickly get used to them because we'll be using them quite a lot. And what I want you to notice is that we can represent all kinds of numbers in Python. We can represent decimals by, like you noticed I used 5.4, I just used the dot. We can also represent negative numbers if we put that dash or that minus sign in front of our numbers. So pretty much any way that you use a calculator, you can use it like that in Python. Okay, and I went over this briefly on we can use these print statements, and if we put them line after line, Python will just run them one after the other. So print 345, print 10 divided by 5, and print 3 times 3 times 5. Let's just go back here, and you can see that we can keep going, and this might be a little bit different. 3 times 3 times 5, okay. And we can keep adding, and it will just add what it's going to print out for us. And I ran that, and here it is. Wonderful. So hopefully you're able to get this part of Replit working. If you are having trouble, please reach out to one of the TAs on Discord, and they can help you with that. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about how we're doing those mathematical operations. And Python is going to follow the order of operations, which maybe you remember this from a math class in high school or middle school, perhaps.
Miranda?
Yes.
Moran. Can you go back one slide so I can take notes on what I missed?
Yes, so we have all of the slides on the Google Drive. So if you miss slides, you can go back and look at those. And if one of my TAs could put that in the chat, that would be great.
Miranda, I'm sorry to interrupt. Someone on the chat asked the same question, and it's not your slides. Your slides are fine. Sometimes it's how Zoom sets up when it originally loads a meeting. So if anyone's having problems like seeing the edges of the slide or it looks too zoomed in, if you go to the top of you put your mouse to the top of your screen, it will come up with you are viewing Miranda Shirk's screen, and then next to it, it will say view options. If you click that drop down, it will show you like a couple options: fit to window, 50%, 100%, whatever. If you go to 50%, that's what I keep mine like automated on, then it'll kind of reduce the size of the screen share. And it's likely because Miranda's working on a very big, exciting data science desktop size screen like I am. So we're used to having that size. But if you're not, then it's going to look enlarged.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. If anyone has any questions about that, throw them in the chat. I can help you. Let me just quickly take a screenshot. There we go. I'm going to throw that in the chat. Let me know if you need anything else. Back to you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for that, Jess. I did not realize that. Yes, I am using a pretty large screen. But we also do have those. Of course, I'm always happy to slow down. If people need me to slow down, go back a slide. Always happy to do that. I just also want to point out that you can also access these slides as well. All right. Checking. Okay, looks like we've got most things being resolved in the chat. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know, left side cutoff, that might be your Zoom settings. I wish I could help, but I don't know what you're seeing.
Again, it's probably just the size of the actual screen. So if you like pull the Zoom itself may have enlarged to fill your whole screen. If you go to the top left, if you're on Mac, or top right, okay, you sent a screenshot. I will deal with this in the chat, Miranda. You carry on.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jess. Great. Okay. Yes, and do let us know if you're having issues, because we want everyone to actually be able to see the class content and enjoy the class. All right, back to operations. So Python will follow the order of operations. Maybe you remember PEMDAS is how I learned it. Some people learned it. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. These are all different ways to talk about the order of operations and how we know like what operations are going to happen first. So if you want to try this and check out the order of operations, you can add in some parentheses here and see what the different answers will be here. So do these output different answers? Let's see. All right, I'm just gonna, oops, not do that. I'm going to snatch this, go to replit. Let's try print this, and then print this. Okay, so difference here, we've got 5 times in parentheses 4 minus 2 plus 1, and then 5 times 4 minus 2 plus 1. And now if we run this, I'm going to clear my output over here so you can see it. Maybe I'll clear my output. There we go. All right. Now if I click this run button, we'll see that these actually output different answers. That's something to keep in mind when you're coding, is you need to remember your order of operations, or at the very least, here's a hack. Just use parentheses. Whichever operation you want to happen first, use parentheses to note. So first I want 4 minus 2, and then 5 times that answer, and then plus 1 to that answer. That gives me 11. So always remember your parentheses can be your friend. Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about mathematical operations, and we'll get back to that. We'll get back to some mathematical operations, but what if we want to print text? What if I want to say hello, or I don't want to do math? What if I want to print out hi, or print out some poem or something? Well, this takes us to a discussion of data types. A data type is a type of data. It's a recognized value type associated with certain operations within Python. So these will differ based on the programming language, but we're going to have a couple basic data types, and we'll learn how to recognize and categorize different pieces of data in Python as these different types. So the first type that we have is integer. This is a whole number, so like 500. 5. Anything without a decimal point is going to be an integer. And this is represented by the Python code int. So if you see int, Python is talking about an integer. The next is a float. This stands for floating point number, which is a fancy way to say decimal. So 4.8, 5.5, 5,000.142. All of these things are floats. That's any kind of number with a decimal. String or str, this is a series of characters in quotes. This is what you and I think of as words, but Python will only recognize something as words or as a string if it's inside quotes. So quote, hello, end quote, this is a string data type. Anything within quotes. Maybe you recall the earlier comment about numbers being in quotes actually just printed that number. That's because anything inside quotes is going to be recognized by Python as a string. So it's just going to print that string. We'll look at that in a bit too. And then the final data type that we're going to look at is a bool or a Boolean. This is a fun word. And it's just a fancy way of saying true or false. And in Python, it's literally the words true and false with a capital T or a capital F. This gets very useful if you want to check if a certain statement is true. Let's say you want to check if a number is even. You can say something, we'll learn how to do that, but you'll need some sort of true or false value. If this number is even, true, do this. False, do this. So we'll learn how to work with those true false values in a future class as well. But for now, you just need to know these 4 data types: int, float, string, and bool. Pausing just to make sure I'm catching any questions. Just as a reminder, please do feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. All right. And why am I going on about these data types? It's important because they allow for different operations. You can't divide hello by 3 or something silly like that. At least in Python, you can't. There's probably some programming languages that allow for silly things like that. But in Python, it's really important to know the data type you're dealing with so that you can then determine the operation that you're going to use. So let's look at strings for a little bit. We looked at numbers now, or at integers and floats. Now let's look at strings. This is something that Python is going to interpret as literal text, not code. Anything inside these quotes, it's not going to interpret as code. And it's contained within these single or double quotes. So you can try the print, our old friend, the print statement. You can print hello in quotes. And then I'm going to ask you to try these other things. So let's go ahead and open up Replit. And let me know, go ahead and try this, and then let me know in the chat what happens if you print hello just like this with these spaces. And then what happens if you print hello without quotes? Go ahead and try it out. Go ahead and try it out, and then let me know what happens in the chat. So I'm going to say print hello. Print hello, and print hello. So if we have this code, what's going to happen when we run it? Go ahead and put your answers here in the chat, and I'll be watching for your answers. Great, great. We are going ahead and getting some answers here. Yes, when you hit the run, it's only going to run this main.py file. So I am changing the same file each time. It's only running main.py. So if you create another file and then try to run off of that, it won't work, at least in Replit. This green button just goes to the main file. Yep. Awesome, awesome. Yep, magic run button. Great, great, great. I love it. Thank you all for your input. So I have the code right here. And if I run this, it gives me hello, hello with spaces. Notice that it actually kept these spaces that we put within the quotes. That's important. That's something to note about strings, is even white space counts as a string, as long as it's within quotes. And then now we have this scary error message. But error messages are actually not that scary. We'll get practice with reading them. And actually we can see it says name error, name hello is not defined. This is Python's way of telling us that it doesn't know what we mean by hello. It's not a command like print, and it's not something else that we've defined, which we'll talk later about what that means. But so it's saying it doesn't recognize this at all. And so you need all of your strings to be surrounded by quotes if you wanted to print something. Great. Thank you all so much for your answers. Yes, and then we've got some good points in the chat as well. So let's go back to that number example. So recall, we have, print 1 + 1. And now we have print, and go ahead and try it along with me, 1 + 1. This first one, go ahead and think about what this is going to do. What will this first one print? You can put it in the chat if you like, or you can just think about it. We're going to print 1 + 1, and then we're going to print in quotes 1 + 1. And I'm going to run it in 3, 2, 1. There we go. And so actually in this one, it actually printed that answer because we didn't have these numbers in quotes, these integers. This time we do, and so this becomes a string. And what it's going to do is actually just literally print this to the screen. So we have 2 here, which is the value of the integers 1 + 1. And then we have the literal string 1 + 1. So just a little bit of an example of how to play around with these different, play around with these different data types. Awesome, awesome. Python strings. Okay. So combining strings and integers, I mentioned before that these different operations, these different data types really determine what operations that you can do with them. So what if we want to combine strings and integers? And I saw some people in the chat kind of hinting at this as well. What happens if we try to add a string to an integer or to a float? Well, this leads us to some operations are not exactly compatible with two values of different types. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So some operations are not compatible when you don't have the right types together. So you can't add the integer 3 to the string hello. Python will give you an error. We'll look at that. You can't divide the string hello by the integer 5. And we're going to dive deeper into some special operations specifically for strings in a later class, but let me show an example of what I'm talking about. So if I go here, where we are printing, I'm trying to go slow with my screen so that people can catch up. All right, so here, it's trying to give me a suggestion. If I try to say 5 plus, hello, and now I run this, oh, another error. Let's read this error message and see what it's saying. So it's got all of this. The most important part of the error is the very last line. So if you get an error, read the last line. It says type error, unsupported operand types for addition, integer, and string. Well, this is telling us exactly what the error is here. It's saying that you can't use this operation, plus sign, between an integer and a string. So what can we do? What can we do? Well, in this case, we actually, if you want to put the whole thing, put this in quotes, you can add 2 strings together. 5 hello. See, let me clear this so you can see it. If I add these 2 strings together, it's just mashing them together. We'll talk about the details of that later. And we can add 2 integers together, but we can't add a string and an integer. So something to keep in mind, All right. So now we have come to a part where we can start talking about variables. So before we've been typing in the same information each time to run a print statement. We've been saying, print 5, print hello, print 10.292. And that's not very efficient. What if one of our values changes? What if we're doing math and we're trying to calculate, the number of cats I have, if I'm allowed to have, 1 cat per room in my house. And I can say, okay, there's 5 rooms in my house, so I can have 5 times 1 cat equals 5 cats. But what if somehow that formula changes? Maybe the ratio is then going to be 2 cats per room in my house. And then it just gets a little messy. So when our numbers are changing, we want to be able to change them without changing an entire print statement. What if we need to add a lot of numbers? Then you have to change the entire print statement. That's what I was saying before. I'll show you what I mean. What if we want to save information and use it later? So what if I want to reference the number of cats that I have at some point as a named something that I can use in a later calculation? This is where we're going to talk about variables. It's a way to save your work, so to speak, in Python. It's a way to save a value to a specific name. And then from then on, within that program, Python will recognize that name and it'll associate it with the value you gave it. So let's look at what variables are. Okay, slides progress. There we go. Variables are allowing you to assign a value to a specific variable name. It's going to use what we're calling the assignment operator, what many of you know as the equal sign. Assignment operator. It's not going to be like math. Python is going to recognize that when you say some sort of variable name equals a value, that you're assigning that value to the variable. And then we can use that variable in place of that value anytime. So notice here, if we make the variable a, we say a equals 2. Now, for the rest of our program, Python is going to say, okay, whenever I see a by itself, that's going to be the value 2. So then we can say print a, and it will print whatever value is assigned to a. All right, let's try it out. Let's go back to Replit and see what we can do here. All right, back to Replit. I'm going to clear this page. And so we'll talk about what you can name a variable in a second, but let's just call our variable a for now. So a equals 2. Now I can say print a. And if I run that, it's now going to print 2. Let's say this number changes. Let's say whatever a is representing, if it's, like an algebraic statement or something, let's change this number. Let's say a equals 10.5. Now we can print a, and now it will print 10.5, that new value of a. Let's set a to the string hello world. And now if we run this, it's going to print hello world. So variables are really great for saving that information that you want to have for later. So let's say we want to do some sort of operation. All right, so I'm clearing this. So a equals 10, b equals 7. Let's print a couple things. Let's print 10 plus 7. And then let's, oh, nope. We need to use our variables. Let's print a plus b. And now let's print a times b. All right, notice that there's no space in between this print statement and the parentheses, but you can have spaces in here if you'd like to make it more readable. Either is fine. So now if I run this, it's going to take a is 10, b is 7, a plus b, in fact, is 17, and a times b is, in fact, 70. Amazing. So we can create pretty much as many variables as we want. I mean, given the memory of your computer, but anything for this class, within the scope of this class, we can create different variables and operate on them in this way. So very, very useful. And then I have this as well. So you can, this is an example of a screenshot if you like to have screenshots. So, the formula for this is my value equals 3. So some variable name, the equal sign called the assignment operator, and then whatever value you want to assign it. So you can also do something like my underscore name equals, in quotes, Miranda, or whatever your name is. So let's talk a little bit about what we can and cannot name variables. Variable names in Python must start with a letter. It can't start with a number because that confuses Python. It thinks you want to do math. So variable names must start with a letter. Can't be in quotes or anything because that would be a string. Variable names must start with a letter. They must contain only letters, numbers, or underscores. No other special characters. Only letters, numbers, and underscore. No spaces. It is also case sensitive. So age, all caps, is different from the variable age, no caps. And it cannot be what is already a Python keyword. So you can try, but it's not recommended to make a variable called print, for instance. Remember, we already learned that the print statement is used by Python. It recognizes that. And then if you all of a sudden set print to be something else, it could result in errors down the line. So I don't recommend using any sort of Python keyword. And if you'd like a comprehensive list of Python keywords, you can click on this link here. And this will tell you some of the keywords that Python has. And these are ones that you just don't want to name your variables because you might overwrite, the word and or something, and that would be a catastrophe. It's okay, we'll survive. But you can click on that to see some of these Python keywords. So here's some example variable names. A_number. Notice there's no spaces in this, there's no quotes or special characters, we just have the letter A, an underscore, and then the word number. I always like to give my variable name something that makes sense. So before we've been using A and B, but in practice, if you are interested in coding for a job, for instance, you want to give your variables some sort of descriptive name that describes what it is. So if you're saving a random number, then you can name that variable random number, something like that. Or num1 stands for number and 1, or num2 or something. So those are some examples of acceptable variable names. My_string. Okay, so let's practice this all as a team. Create a variable called my_name. Put whatever value you want. I'm going to put my name. You can put your name or whatever you'd like. And then we're going to print that out. So go ahead and open Replit and practice this all together. And then I suppose do a thumbs up or smiley face in the chat or something once you finish. So I'm going to say my_name. So you can see the instructions. Create a variable called my name and then print out my name. And then tell me when you're done in the chat or give a thumbs up of some sort. Great, great. And some smileys and thumbs up. Great. Getting a syntax error, so exciting. If you get an error, put the error message or a screenshot in the chat. We can help you out with that. Oh, an error, wonderful. That means that we're trying stuff. All right, if you get an error, put the screenshot in the chat or send it to one of the TAs. Oh, many errors. All right, we'll try it. We'll try it all together. Everyone try. If you're getting an error, then we'll try it all together, see where that error might have happened. Oh, so someone said I got an error because I didn't put my name in quotes, not my_name, the value of it. So do remember, strings in Python need to be in quotes. So if you're trying to assign your variable to a string, needs to be in quotes. Awesome. I'm gonna wait a couple, maybe another minute. My name not defined. That is an error message when you haven't defined your variable. So if you just try to print my name without defining it as a variable first, that's going to be your error. Good, good. Thank you so much, everyone, for telling me the results. I love it. This helps me know where to go with the class. All right, our responses have slowed down a little, so let's go ahead and try it all together. All right. So one tip, this is an example of a comment. I haven't really talked about this. This is just text a note to yourself that you can write. So put this little hashtag or sharp symbol here, pound symbol, whatever generation you were born in. and you can write notes to yourself. So I'm going to write out, our task is to create variable my name and print it. All right, so this is just for me, a little note for me. That's pretty helpful. All right, now I'm going to have my name, that's my variable, equals, and depending on your version of Replit, it may give you some suggestions on what you can type. So I'm going to put my name equals Miranda. And then one thing that Replit does is when you start a quote, it will automatically finish it for you. Be sure that you go on the other side of this quote and then press enter to go to the next line. Otherwise, if you're inside the quote, your quote continues. That's not good. All right. Replit tries to be helpful, but then is sometimes not. All right, so now that I've defined my name, I can use the print statement and print my underscore name. Remember that this variable needs to perfectly match whatever name you've given to your variable. The word name is coming up too many times, so I'm going to give you another example. But this variable needs to exactly match what you're referencing here. So let's clear this console real quick. So if you did it exactly like this, then you should have your name printed to the console. Let's look at some of those errors that some people got. So one of them was syntax error. So if I get rid of the quotes here and I say my underscore name equals Miranda, remember Python doesn't know this is a word. It doesn't know what this is. And so if I run this, it's going to say name error, name Miranda is not defined. If I have, Miranda, and then I don't close that quotation. So notice I only have one quote. I haven't closed it. Now it's a syntax error and it says unterminated string literal. It even tells us what line it is. That means, so that's a sign we need to go back and look at our string, and sure enough, you need to make sure you close that quote there. All right, and let me check the chat to see what other errors we got. Yes, and you don't want to put, so Python is a little different from other programming languages. You don't need to put the word var or anything. All right, let's try it. Let's try this mistake. And if you make mistakes, that's okay. Let's put a space in between my and name. Let's see what happens here. So now my variable is called my space name. Oh, syntax error, invalid syntax, and it's going to point me to this. It says, this is wrong. That's because you can't have any spaces. Remember, Python interprets spaces as your next command of sorts, right? It's kind of like if you put a space in the middle of a word, it makes no sense. So make sure that you have that underscore there. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Great, so these error messages are usually telling us what's wrong. You just need to read them closely, and usually that last line, so this line here, for instance, says syntax error unterminated string literal. And this told us that we didn't terminate the string. Fancy way of saying we didn't put in a quote at the end. Awesome, awesome. Great practice if you're still having issues. Yes, and I love seeing people's notes as well in the chat. Great, great, great. It works. Okay, I love it. I'm glad to see that we're all getting there. Super happy. If you're still having issues with it, then please do put something in the chat for our TAs. Something else I want to show you real quick is Colab. So switching track, if you really, Replit is nice. It gives you an environment that emulates what Python would look like if you were building software, for instance. But let's say you want to take notes or you're just wanting to learn about coding, which all of us are, then in that case, I really like Colab. I just want to take a couple seconds to look at Colab. So what I'm going to do, go to Colab, colab.research.google.com. If you create an account with your Gmail, then you can save your notebook. I'm not going to do that just now. So I'm going to hit new notebook. Give everyone time to get to Colab for a second. All right, file, new notebook. It's going to make me sign into Google. Okay. So now we have this notebook open. We can give it a name. Notice that the extension is .ipynb. That stands for Python Notebook or IPython Notebook. So I'm going to call this, variable practice. You can name it whatever you'd like. And this will live in your Google Drive, whatever's associated with your Gmail. What I want to show you is that you can have, this is a really great way to take notes. So you can have text up here. Just double click to enter. Notes on practicing with variables. And so now it'll have some words here if you'd like some words. And then these little code cells are actually separate. So you can have little separate code cells to run. Again, press this play button and it'll run your code there. Oh, it's trying to start up. There we go. Run your code there, put the output below. You can add another code cell, print 5, something like that. Then when we practiced variable names, you can say my_name equals Miranda. So if you're the type of person that really likes to take notes, then I highly recommend notebooks. You'll also, if you want to get into machine learning or data science, you will see notebooks a lot because this is primarily how we teach machine learning and data science is through something like this, a notebook. So this is called a Python notebook, also a Jupyter notebook. If you need help with notebooks, we'll handle that outside of class. Just because, we want to make sure we focus on the coding here. But please, I encourage you to use this if you like. It does allow you to separate your code out and then talk about it in different ways. So occasionally I might pull up Google Colab instead of pulling up Replit, just because I want you guys to have experience with a bunch of different softwares. All right. Okay, and I do see the thing with the assignment. So last time I did email out the assignment, that was because I had the wrong assignment in the slides. Usually the assignments will be in the slides, but I'll also put it on the Discord as well if you miss it. But you should all have access to the slides. Okay, so now we've talked about variables. We had a lot of fun with that. So let's go back to operations now that we've had that discussion. Okay, if you have Colab questions or other questions, feel free to put those in the chat or the Discord, we can discuss them as well. All right, so going back to operations, this is, like I said, think of mathematical operations. It's where you're changing or comparing values. And remember, we had a whole discussion about data types because certain data types allow for certain operations. Like I said, you can't multiply or you can't divide hello by 10 or something. So let's look at what operations are allowed. So ints and floats, integers and floats or decimals, these can be in the same operations because they are both numbers. So integers, floats, any number can be in the same operation with another number. And these operations are exactly like you're thinking. It's math. It's addition, subtraction, multiplication. So 5.0 plus the integer 7, totally fine. 5.0 plus 7 times 0.01 divided by 9, all of that is totally good. You can put in your numbers in any operations for math that you would like. The answer, however, will either be a float or an integer. So 5.0 plus 7, that answer that I print is either going to be a float or an integer. So if you're only dealing with integers, so you add, subtract, multiply only integers, then that answer will also be an integer. The result will also be an integer. If you have some sort of operation combining an integer and a float, however, that result will be a float. This matters down the line when you're wanting to later manipulate those numbers or maybe put it through a function that requires something to be either an int or a float. But we'll get some practice with this. And then if you divide two integers together, that will also result in a float. Even if they divide evenly into each other, it will still be a float. A float. All right. So let me show an example. let's look at some of these int and float operations and then we'll practice. Next time I'll practice in Colab so you can get a feel for that as well. Okay, so here are some examples of mathematical operations that we can use. We have, of course, the plus, minus, star for multiplication. We have division. We have exponent. Slash, 2 slashes is called integer division. This will return the whole number that divides the two numbers. And then the percent sign is modulo, or the remainder. That's the remainder after you divide the first number by the second number, which some of you discovered in your homework last time. So these are an example of some of the, I think most of the operations that you can use for floats and integers. And something that is important to note is that integer division and modulo will always return an integer. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these. And something that I wrote in the slides, oh, here we go. I forgot to mention this, or maybe I did mention it and I forgot that I did. We can check the type of the data type of a value, whether it's a float, an int, a string, or a Boolean, with this other Python command called type. So we can check it with that type. And I'll show you why we may want to do this here. All right, let's try out Colab. So here I have my Colab notebook. And you can use, if you would rather use Replit, we can, well, okay, today I'll use Replit. Next time I'll use Colab, so that if you already have your Replit set up, we'll just use that today. I don't want to cause problems for anyone. So let's use Replit today. Next time, practice with Colab and we'll use Colab. Okay, so I'm just gonna erase what we had here. So I'm gonna make a new variable called my integer. I'm gonna name it 5, or name it, I'm gonna assign it to the value 5. And now I can print out the type of my integer. This may not actually print it. Yep. Okay. So type my integer will return what type this is. I'm going to print that. So we've gotten into some nesting here. So you can say print and then type of whatever variable you want, and it'll tell you that type. Notice this says class int, which means integer. So we can check the type in that way. Check the type of variable. All right. Let us try addition. So let's try this example here. X equals 5 plus 7, and then let's check the value of X as well as the type of X. All right, so I'm going to have X equals 5 plus 7. Now I'm going to print X. And on the next line, I want to print the type, the data type of X. So go ahead and think in your head, 5, an integer plus a floating point number 7.0. What should that type be? I'm going to clear this. And now if I run this, it gives us the answer. 5 plus 7.0 is 12.0, and that answer is a float. Okay. Yes, please put yes. All right. I see some people are working out errors in the chat. I love that. Okay, now let's try another example here. Let's try 10 minus x equals to integers 10 minus 6. Oops. So in this case, x equals 10 minus 6. I'm still printing x and then type x. Notice now that we're using variables, we don't have to edit these print statements at all. We can keep them exactly the same. That is the beauty of variables. So if I run this now, the integers 10 minus 6 is going to result in the integer 4. So just an example of how these operations can interact with each other. We can, now let's make it 10 minus 6.0. Now it's 4.0 because we had a float value in here. So usually if there's a floating point or decimal in an operation, it's going to make the result a floating point as well. Something just for you to know for the future. We're not going to deal with that extensively. Okay. Great. Let me see, how much do we have here? All right, great. So the last thing that I want to cover before we break today is string operations. So we talked about integer and float operations just now. With numbers, math, we're pretty familiar with it. Let's look at what we can do with strings. So strings cannot be in an operation with a float or an integer. And if you think about it, it makes no sense for that to happen. But strings can be concatenated or added with other strings. And what I mean by concatenation is you just take these two strings and shove them together. So if I have my string equals AB plus CD, that is allowed in Python, and that result is going to be ABCD. If you have X equals, in quotes, hello, plus operator, and in quotes, exclamation point, that's going to be hello, exclamation point. So anything inside the quote is a string, like I mentioned. So even numbers inside of that are strings. So anything inside of the quotes are strings, and then you can concatenate them together. Notice this is not within a string, the plus sign. Otherwise, it'll just print the plus sign. So let's look at that real quick, and then I'll assign the homework. Okay, so let's print. What did I have as this? Right, let's try this one, my underscore string. Okay, I'm going to erase this. So now we have my string equals AB plus CD. And now if we print my string, what will we get? Let's find out. So my string is AB plus CD. And if we print that, let me print. And now our string is ABCD. All right, now let's see. Let's make my string equals hello plus exclamation mark. We're going to concatenate these with the addition operator. And then it gives us hello with a little exclamation mark added. Let's try out a little bit more advanced, Let's make, I'm going to make two variables. I'm going to say greeting equals hello. So I'm going to make a variable called greeting. That is going to be hello. And now I'm going to make a variable called name equals Miranda. What will be the value of greeting plus name? So if I go ahead and put in the chat as our last in-class exercise, if I have greeting equals hello, name equals Miranda, what is going to be the value of greeting plus name? You can either try to guess or you can try to run it yourself and then put your answer in the chat. Some people have caught on to my little trick. Go ahead and put in the chat what this will be. Great job, great job. All right, I'm gonna run it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great, some people customized it to their own name. A lot of people caught on to my trick. Okay, let's just run it. Hello, Miranda. No space. That's because we didn't include a space in our string. So actually we have hello, Miranda is the value of these two strings concatenated. Remember, they're just going to squish together. Python doesn't know grammar rules. Python doesn't know anything about the English language. It just knows that I asked it to smush these two variables together. Awesome. So if we wanted a space in there, we could, of course, add a space in that variable. And now if we run it, it has hello space and then my name. And we have hit the top of the hour. That means the end of our class. Thank you so much for your participation today. It really means a lot to me. I'm really happy to see everyone participating. Great, great, great. So let's go ahead and talk about the homework. So we have a couple slides here that I didn't talk about. That's okay. You don't need it for the homework. and we will review those next week. I've got 2 assignments. Some of you already did one of the assignments because you decided to do extra, and that's great. So our assignments today are on these final slides here. So we're going to write Python code that's going to initialize 2 variables called num1 and num2. Assign the
Miranda?
values of these variables to be, oh, yes, and can you please raise your hand if you need to unmute?
I just want to ask, when is the assignment due?
Just by the next class.
Next class? Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm all caught up.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah, do the assignments by the next class is totally fine. If you want, you can email it to me beforehand and I can give you feedback. Just give me a couple days to give you feedback. So if you send it to me today, I'll probably get back to you within the next couple of days. But you know, this course is at your own pace. So if for whatever reason you don't have time, that's totally okay.
Will you
Yeah,
accept late work? Will you accept late work?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. It's a very relaxed class. So just as long as you're patient with me, I will get back to you as soon as I can, even if it's late. Totally fine. Good questions. All right, yes. So we have this assignment. So initialize these 2 variables and then assign the values to any that you would like, and then print out the following here. Yes, Varun. Varun, you can unmute if you have a question. Okay, Varun, if you have a question, let me know. All right, and so that's this first assignment. Second assignment is also using our print statement and variables here. So let us know in the Discord if you need help with these assignments or you just want to talk to your fellow classmates. That's all that I have for you today. So if you have questions, feel free to stick around. I can stick around for a couple more minutes, usually after each class, if you want to ask me questions. Feel free to find the link to the slides in our syllabus, and I will see you next week. Thank you, everyone. All right, see y'all later.